The 3,300 acres that we're leasing to you guys. First, I gotta ask you about the lease. The lease you have right now in Iron County, is this a permanent, or does this have to be negotiated again?
Right now, we have an option to lease the land from the county.
You have the option. And can the county, do you have to renegotiate that lease with the county?
No, in the option, there was an Exhibit B that was attached to the option and said this is what the lease will look like.
So there is no more negotiation with the lease.
That's correct.
I've got another one here. What can the county board and GTac agree to do in order to add compensation for the loss of the currently allowed public uses in the future lease with GTac? Because right now, people have got access to those lands to go hunting and, you know, I don't know if they do any harvesting of mushrooms or whatever. But, you know, there's things out there people do go, you know, bird hunting, like I said, deer hunting, whatever. So now that's gonna be lost. I mean, that's,
Yeah, and I
Something
believe
to think
in the rent, there's a compensation in there, is that it's not just a stumpage by the acreage of type of tree, but there's also an additional amount in there. And that could very easily be what is used then for offsetting that.
Additional 10%, which I think was related to lost recreational.
Recreational.
That was,
use.
well, that was the thing is too, is you're talking about so you guys have an option of 25% more land in the county, correct? In the lease, another 800 and some acres.
Yep.
but that land is adjoining to the land that you're leasing now. It's not, cause I've heard different stories. Oh, you might jump up to Saxon, you know, you might find something up there and you're gonna go up there and you're gonna check that out. But let's get that straight. That's gonna be adjoining to the property that the lease is right now, right?
It's land that will be deemed necessary for the taconite mining operation.
It could be, and
So if you say, can you go to Lake Superior and take a chunk right on the shoreline, there aren't a lot of county forest lands on the shoreline, but that's hard fetched to see how that would play.
so it doesn't necessarily have to be, I don't know if it has to be contiguous with it, but it has to be directly related to the operation. It has to be necessary for the operation. And because it's only a surface lease, it's not something where you can go and prospect to go set up another mine or something like that.
You know,
There is no right to those things.
in your lease, you're not gonna use all 3,300 acres, isn't that correct?
You're correct.
Of the 3,300 acres, approximately how much are you gonna use?
Maybe half.
The farther section, and I'm saying down by Tyler Forks and that, this is all wetlands, correct?
Yeah.
Basically. You guys aren't going near that, isn't that right?
That's right.
Okay, so I think people are mistaken. They're not going to use that area. They're only gonna use about half of it, from what you're told.
I just wanted to add on the additional acreage, if there were anything added to that agreement, that would undergo land with, or withdrawal from the county forest program as well, which would be subject to either the county or the DNR's request of a public hearing. So, I mean, that's not just something that they can just say, hey, we want 25% more
Right,
property and
right.
go and do whatever they want.
And it also
There's a
says
process involved in it.
if it's not able to take that out of the county forest land, the company can still use it if there's a logging road that they need for access or for any of this. And it does on page 11 of the lease go on to further state that the restrictions that the leasee cannot conduct any activities on the additional lands that would violate any restrictions on use of county forest land under Wisconsin statute 28.11. So there's those restrictions still exist.
Very specific rules on what can and cannot be done in county forest.
And
That's
so
correct.
if you picked the 800 acres and besides this, and the county did not want to take that 800 acres out of forest cropland, then what happens? You end up in court or what?
I don't know if it's so much in court, we'd have to read that through again, but what it basically says is you will try to take it out, and if it doesn't succeed in taking it out, then we as the leasee have the option of continuing using that if we need it, but we have to stay within the restrictions that are upon that land by the county forest management Wisconsin statute.
The reason that there's that much land is so that we can avoid and minimize the impacts. So if you just had the amount of land that was necessary for the storage, you wouldn't be able to avoid wetlands and things like that. So having more gives greater flexibility to be able to avoid and minimize impacts.
Yeah, because we never voted to sell GTac anyway.
No, it's always,
And it was
There is-
just,
there is-
so that's fine, that was another question.
they got their land there.
Absolutely no option to purchase.
No,
Okay, but you are responsible for the county land 7 years from now.
Will be, the primary period's 50 years, and then there's the option to extend that by 5-year increments not to exceed 99 years. That's
Whose
correct.
option, the county's or yours?
That's in the lease agreement that says the primary lease of time is 50 years. And then it's incremental, but we are responsible for the reclamation. The plans that are accepted and approved by the state apply to that land as well as it does to the other properties. And we still maintain the responsibility of that.
Does the lease allow a mining company to legally choose additional land anywhere in the county, such as at Lake Superior or the Guile Flowage?
The answer to that,
Kyle, there's a portion of the 16, section 16, and a portion of section 15, that leaves 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 36, 35, 34, 32. Those aren't sections that the county has, but nonetheless, it says if it's related to the taconite operation, it has that ability to do so.
One of the last questions asked was about the lease, is it legal? And I did talk to Mr. Williams, and if it's legal for them to take it anywhere else, and he said it had to be associated with mining. I showed him the lease agreement that I have, and he said, well, I think it's in there. And he looked for it and could not find it, and will get back to me, but I'm pretty sure legally, I mean, we have to be careful, because if their intention is to build, but we really don't know who this mine might end up, whose hands this might end up in. So promises and intentions and all that, they mean nothing.
how many tons are you gonna dump on our land? The tailings.
Of tailings.
Don't
Yeah,
play
they'll-
games with me
Or
with
do you want
words.
just-
What do you, how many tons of whatever are you gonna dump on our land?
We still have to lay down the plans on how much capacity is in the area that we're looking at, as well as what's in the pit. Okay, we have an idea of what layers contain what grades of iron, and we have an idea of what layers we don't want to put through the plant because it doesn't contain enough irons to make it worth the cost. But until we sit down and actually put this into a program or a database that dissects all this, it doesn't do us any good to do it now, because we're gonna be adding drill holes to it, which will refine that database. So if you look at it in the general scope of things, and that's all we can talk on right now is general, because we haven't started the studies yet, is we're saying that this overall average on this property is about 3.4 tons of crude to make a ton of pellet, which means you've got 2.4 tons of tailings for every 1 ton of pellet that goes out the door. So now we've got to balance the size of pit 1 with the size of pit 2. In other words, we've got to make a big enough hole so that when we backfill from the second pit into the first pit, that we have enough room to accommodate all the material in between. So to give you an exact number of how many tons right now, we don't have that. But when we sit down and do the reclamation plan and we start taking the ideas in and laying out what we do have, that's when those numbers start firming up. And it's like in any case, what I can tell you today may change tomorrow, or it may not.
But you're gonna dig pit 1, correct? Take the tack line of pit 1. Pile everything from pit 1 on Iron County land, is that correct?
Yep.
Then you're gonna dig pit 2. You're gonna take the waste out of pit 2 and fill pit 1 up, that's
Yes.
correct? Okay, and then you're gonna reclaim, when it's all done, pit 2 is gonna be a big lake. Pit 1's gonna be reclaimed ahead of time, is that correct?
Correct.
Pit 1 and pit 2 is not Iron County land,
That's correct.
Who owns pit one and pit two?
The mineral rights are owned by RGGS and LaPointe Mining Companies.
Okay, who owns the land?
They do.
They do as well.
So you guys own no land in the county.
That's correct.
What happens, let's say the mine lasts 35 years and there are samples or negative findings, acid or other problems coming from the mine site or from the tailings, or overburden on the county land. It may be several years later, who is responsible and how do we go about this?
Well, first of all the studies that we have to do, you've heard the waste characterization. We want to know how this is going to react before we even put it into a pile. So you do these studies where you're collecting samples, you're running them through different testing to replicate aging to see what comes out of the rock or comes out with the water. So the first idea is let's prevent the problem before it ever happens. If there is a problem, then we're still responsible for it. You know, the reclamation bonds and everything stay in place, so we still have to be there.
So there is some assurance that 35, 50, 100 years from now, that there is money to remediate the problem.
Yes, sir.
My concern is, I mean, I'm gonna be dead before you guys start digging this up. But I don't want 50 years down the road, my great grandchildren say, Jesus, what the hell did they do to us? I don't want that.